Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching Off the Beaten Track, a program in which we have conversations with eminent people from the field of academics, politics, media, and businesses. We will today be talking about the current political situation in India. Things appear to be in a state of churn at the moment. That is what we are going to be talking to. And we will be speaking with Shruti Kapila, who is a professor of politics and history at the University of Cambridge. She is a globally reputed scholar of both history and politics, especially the Indian facet of the entire subject. She recently, in fact, 2 years ago, wrote a book, Violent Fraternity, Indian Political Thought in the Global Age. So Shruti Kapila, first of all, thank you very much for coming and joining us all the way from London, amid a very busy schedule, jetting off to New Zealand just tomorrow after this. So thank you very much. My first question to you is actually constructed from partly my thoughts and also from partly what you have written very recently. We are seeing in India a situation which is slightly different from what was there earlier in the year, when everybody was saying the 2024 Lok Sabha elections appear to be a done deal. It no longer is appearing to be a done deal. We can make out by a series of startling actions by the Prime Minister and the others in the BJP. We can actually start counting it right from the time of setting up a committee to have simultaneous elections, both for parliament as well as for state assemblies, holding a special session of parliament from Monday, then finally, replacing or trying to replace India with Bharat, or rather using Bharat more often than India as the country name, as the preferred country name. So do you also think that things are a bit unsettled in India at the moment? Your article exactly says that after nearly a decade, the Indian political landscape is unsettled anew. I call it that things are not very rosy for Mr. Modi and the BJP at the moment compared to what it was a few months ago.
Yeah.
Please.
Well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. And of course, it's always good to chat and have a discussion, a live discussion on Indian politics. So thank you for that. And I also have benefited from reading your work on particularly the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. So great to actually meet you in this way. So let me say that, yes, I mean, it's for sure, this is an open moment. It's the first opening that India has received politically or got or witnessing since, as it were, I would say, 2012. You could even, date it back to, for nearly a decade, the kind of non-Hindutva politics in India has been stymied with the rise of Modi as a national figure, and then subsequently the Prime Minister. So I was one of those people who, of course, took the India Against Corruption. I was one of the first people, in fact, the first person to write in real time, and when it happened, that this was populist, this was actually going to enable the BJP. Because remember, in 2011-12, there was a huge amount of media love-in for that formation. And I had actually been very cautionary, in fact, critical of it at that very moment itself. So you'd had that moment when you'd had public squares being, occupied by civil society and new kinds of formations. But really, you could say that the kind of a new form of Hindutva under Modi, had in a way stymied the political opposition. It could not really think a way out of its own. It could not think a way out of it. And that certainly has changed. You always had regional parties. You always had regional parties who could, hold their own, whether it was Bengal, whether it is Telangana. Those things are, have been pretty sort of stable, you would say. They don't really, speak directly to the politics of Modi. They speak very directly to those regions and what is happening there. But at a national level, this is a breakthrough moment, a fight back, a real fight back moment in India. And it's very, very interesting that it has taken the form it has taken, because it's, the kind of high octane culture politics.
Right.
Really, that's, the debates around Bharat versus India, the fact that the opposition very cannily and inventively,
Called itself INDIA.
India, because it's laid claim to Modi's monopoly on nationalism.
Right.
So I think so now the next step has happened. The next step is, well, what and whose nationalism? Are we going to speak about Hindu nationalism? Because the debate about Sanatan Dharma was also opened up. So I think you're going to see a much more clearer set of antagonisms appearing, whether it is on nationalism, whether it is on justice, whether it is on federalism, and including the media, because even the media has now been forced to be open about its partisanship with the boycotting and naming of 14 anchors. So I think India is going through a real, for the first time, a real debate about what it means to have Hindu nationalism or Hindutva as a political force running the country.
Would you say that behind this, having a debate for the first time on Hindutva and also looking at non-Hindutva politics as an alternative, this real process actually is about a year old. It actually started exactly on the 8th of September last year. So it's exactly 365 plus days since it started, with Rahul Gandhi's decision to go on a yatra all the way from Kanyakumari right up to Srinagar. And though he embarked on the yatra, with a lot of skepticism, people at that point imagined him as somebody who would not even be able to complete the yatra. But to a great extent, a lot of people feel that he has brought in a counter ideology back into the Indian political system, that you can actually argue on ideological lines against the BJP. You do not have to play what is called, and what has been played for the last 3.5 decades by a large number of parties, including by Mr. Rahul Gandhi, soft Hindutva. We remember just about 5 or 6 years ago, Mr. Gandhi's, caste and, all his religious, profile was being flashed all around by his political party colleagues.
No, yes, for sure. I think the Bharat Jodo Yatra, or the fact that there has been a reinvention, or both in terms of organizationally and ideologically, for the by the Indian National Congress and Mr. Gandhi himself. I think that is certainly a breakthrough. That is the key breakthrough, because you've obviously had regional parties. Mamata held her own in Bengal against Modi. But I think at a national level, there was a kind of big vacuum. You could, even your own work has shown that since the 1980s, there has been a kind of fatal flaw in the Indian National Congress itself, for which has not been able to respond, or even it has been primarily defensive, or not been able to properly respond to the challenge of Hindu nationalism, first under the Mandir movement, and then latterly, against Modi. So the UPA, of course, is a moment, but it's not really an ideological moment. It's a moment of a kind of government and social coalition, which had a lot of progressive ideas and welfarist state. So I definitely think that Mr. Gandhi, as well as the Bharat Jodo Yatra, a return to, as it were, a kind of appeal to Gandhian politics to actually pitch the old political division in India between Hindutva and Gandhi, and reanimating it and refreshing it for our times, is a very significant move. And whether, which is not to say that this is an easy ride, or this is going to this is going to effectively yield results. But I think the Bharat Jodo Yatra, even I remember, eminent columnists writing that this was a walk with no destination. But, however, the mood changed, the media changed after the victory in Karnataka. And you're seeing the replay of the same thing, because in Karnataka, the BJP went for a cultural agenda, It went for Tipu Sultan. It went for, hijab. It kind of tried to kind of create a high octane, Hindutva culture politics, and it didn't work. And
And
so,
Mr. Modi himself went to the extent of equating the Bajrang Dal with Bajrang Bali, as they say, or as Lord
yeah,
Hanuman.
yeah. So that's right. So, and it seems that the BJP is still playing from that playbook because it's the Bharat, India, Sanatan, and so and I think this is going to give an advantage. In fact, it's bizarrely actually the fact that these debates are being pushed in such a way by BJP will actually clarify a lot of the and bring together the opposition even I would say more forcefully together.
But
It will identify it as much more about justice, much more about caste, given the caste census is also on the table. But yeah, I mean, for sure, this is a big moment in India. It's a big moment, and it's only the start because the elections are a few months away, and who knows how it's going to unfold.
right.
But after I would say after 10 to 12 years, there is actually a real political debate in the country. It's not one-sided any longer.
But let me just point out, you use the word Sanatan Dharma, actually that is the latest controversy which is raging ever since the time that Udayanidhi Stalin talked about the Sanatan Dharma and said that, we have to, weaken Sanatan Dharma in some way in the country. Thereafter, the BJP leaders have actually been going and presenting a narrative as if every Hindu is a Sanatani practitioner, completely ignoring the fact that there has been almost a century old debate, even hostilities between, say for instance, the Arya Samaj and the Sanatan Dharma followers. Even within Hinduism there are many ways of following the religion. Sanatan Dharma just happens to be one of them. Now, despite this, what we are seeing is that there is a sense within the parties who call themselves INDIA that let us not rake up too much of Sanatan Dharma because it is unnecessarily going to enable Mr. Modi to play the Hindu card, that card of victimhood once again. Would you say that it is pragmatic to be reticent on the issue, or they should actually go around and to the people and explain what I am trying to argue, that Sanatan Dharma does not mean every Hindu is a Sanatani?
Well, thank you. It's a very live question, and it's an old question, as you know. In some ways, I was thinking of writing. I have to write a column for next week, and I was thinking it's really interesting. A lot of those debates return to the 1920s in some
Right.
ways. Even the Congress reinvention, in this kind of Gandhi way, is a return to an earlier moment. And these polemical debates around religion to have a kind of similarity to what happened 100 years ago.
Right.
I'm not sort of saying anything controversial or unknown, but one of the things about Hinduism is that it is incredibly internally diverse. And
Right.
that diversity is something that even the Arya Samaj, which was one of the biggest, as it were, reformist movements in the late 19th century onwards, also could not, overwhelm. It became one strand, dominant, yes, in North India, but it could not undo the Sanatanis or other kinds of popular religiosity in India. By the same token, the caste question, very much like 100 years ago, has opened up this question again, like in Ambedkar's time, whether caste is an issue which can be sort of its equity or the question of its annihilation can be had within or without Hinduism. These are life questions because people are living with those issues. These are not mere academic debates. But after all, that was the fight Gandhi had with Ambedkar about whether this was a debate. This took these two stalwarts. Now, for what is unfolding today, what I find, if I can be I mean, I don't mean to mock the BJP, but
Right.
I find it, I feel that they are making it in a way easier for the India alliance, because
Okay.
once you start speaking about if you the entire politics seems to be about uniformity, incorporation, and
Right.
bringing in just kind of one uniform idea of, what even, and, what a Hindu is, or what an Indian is. And the two are increasingly being, conflated. But I think, I was slightly taken aback by Mr. Modi's speech, Prime Minister Modi's speech
Yes.
yesterday, because he used the word, they're not Hindus, or like, this is not about Hinduism.
And they're against Hindus.
Hindus, yes, that they're against Hindus. Now, I think it's a very risky move actually on his part, because the whole thing about India is that its Hindus itself are so diverse, if not and unequal. Now, and it, but so he can't actually. It was one thing to say, I'm speaking for the entire nation, which is what he did post Pulwama, that this is,
Right.
a new nationalist security state, geopolitical, the kind of high nationalist rhetoric that you got at that time. Once you start speaking in the name of the Hindu, you are really creating a different kind of partisanship. And I think it's much more risky on the part of the BJP, as what has happened in Karnataka. The more you push the culture war card, because I think, even if you look again historically, I mean, who knows what will happen, but historically one can say that, in the 80s, early 80s onwards, for a decade, the Mandir movement was so, so strong. But yet it took several more years and a fairly different kind of Vajpayee to produce a political kind of majority for the BJP.
Well, it required the Godhra carnage in many ways to be able to give it the kind of push which Ayodhya and related to it, the entire Hindutva movement got. It was Mr.
But
Modi
I'm
wouldn't
making a
have been.
different point. I'm making a different point that Vajpayee came to power before Godhra.
He came
Right?
balancing both sides.
Both sides, yes. But my point is that my point is that there is no, you can exhaust people from this identity politics as well.
Right.
Yeah. So it took a decade for them to win. And I do think that it's identity, passions are too extractive. They demand too much of an individual. Their loyalty is a deeply extractive political emotion. You can't
Right.
keep demanding it all the time. It's an exhausting.
Loyalty and hatred. These are the
Hatred.
things which
Yeah,
you
I mean,
keep on
hatred
asking.
still can be, hatred is still quite fiery. It can come and go, but you can't keep demanding loyalty, which is, from. And I think this is a dangerous politics, and it's a dangerous politics in terms of course, peace and so on in India. But I also think it's a risky move on the part of the BJP, because BJP is trying to kind of say that, well, this is a Vishwa Guru, this is a kind of person who is representing a new India. For that rhetoric to then come with this idea that, this is a major alliance of 28 parties, that they're anti-Hindu, it makes you look small-minded, it makes you look I think it also ushers, I think it also weakens your own territories. It weakens the BJP's territory, because it will seem to be much more exclusive than expansive.
You have actually explained it quite well. There's another point. Let's move away from the fact that there is, the core of the BJP's political discourse continues to be on religion and trying to present just one type of Hindus who are loyal to the BJP. There's a danger which you have flagged, that there's a possibility that Modi would want this election, the next coming election, to be a plebiscite on him. That is something which the opposition India alliance has to avoid, because they should not try to personalize issues very much. While ideological issues are important, but it must also look at the 10 years of which they would highlight as failures. We know that the anti-incumbency is something that we keep on talking about in India, that after a certain point, people get tired of having the same government, because at some point or the other, there will be questions about delivery. Somebody or the other is going to feel that delivery has not been sufficient. And a large number of people, if they start feeling, then governments get voted out. That is how we have seen it. We have seen it at the center. We have seen it, within the states. Now, at the moment, there are no major scandals which have stuck to the BJP and Mr. Modi. I'm not referring to, despite the fact that the Adani issue surfaced in January this year, but somehow or the other, the dirt has not stuck on Mr. Modi the way 2G scam stuck on the UPA government. I am not trying to get into why it did not stick, but this is what appears to be the case, that a large number of people do not. So in that situation, do you think that the opposition would be wise on their part to actually talk about what we call livelihood issues, which are basically the old, as we used to say in Hindi in India, Bijli Sadak Pani. It need not be Bijli Sadak Pani anymore, but basically about bread and butter and bed and a roof over their head and unemployment. People post-COVID, they have not really been able to get back their jobs, and the economy is stagnating, and the people are actually struggling to go back to where they were in 2020, March 2020, when the lockdown was imposed.
Yeah, thank you. Two things here. I actually sort of, again, go back to the history question, to look at it historically. I think in 1977, when you had, again, a kind of massive coalition, which was fixated primarily in removing Indira Gandhi. That's what I kind of wrote in my piece, that it worked, but only worked. It was a Pyrrhic victory because she came back bigger and stronger, because the opposition, that coalition, the 77 coalition, didn't really produce a good political and economic agenda. It was too, it fell disgracefully on its own on its own. And then she came back bigger and stronger, in 1980. And most of those, that led, of course, also to the formation of the BJP. We all, it's very important. Her moment of return is an important moment for Indian politics. But it's a similar juncture, could be a similar juncture at this point. Most people tend to think about this as a UPA moment. I tend to think of this much more in terms of the 77 moment, because you have a kind of churning going on in various political parties, and the way in which ideology is shifting. So I think there's a danger in over egging the Modi question by the opposition, because for good or bad, for many reasons which we can discuss, he remains to be fairly popular amongst the Indians still. So it would be, they would be better off talking about exactly what happened in Karnataka, where you discuss the substantive issues. Inflation, I think, is a major issue. Inflation, unemployment. But what is New India going to look like? Who is it for? Is it only going to be about a mandir? Is it only going to be about hating Muslims? Is it really, what does the future look like? And I think that's what the India coalition is going to have to grab. It's going to have to produce a new vision of India, which is not simply about being defensive. It is not simply like, well, we are just anti-Modi and this is what we stand against. They're going to have to say what they stand for. Some of it is very clear, but a lot more needs to be said and done. And I think the economic question is an important one. Right. But how to animate politics around it, that is also a challenge. So I think it's their work is cut out. But at least one feels that there is a lot of political commitment and experience. There are many leaders here with decades of experience behind them. So they've seen all sorts of, elections come and go. So they can actually build something more substantive than what happened in 77.
We do not know how it will exactly pan out, but definitely everybody at the moment at least appears to be making some sacrifice, personal sacrifices for a collective cause. Let me, as we come towards the end of our conversation, let me ask you another question which comes out of something that you wrote. You make a very succinct point. You say that Modi is less of the everyman or the much beloved underdog figure that Indians initially identified with when he was first anointed. That is, you're going back to 2014. Today's Modi is not the Modi who was the chaiwala of 2014. Today's Modi is what we call in Hindi the big man or the Bada Sahib, somebody who actually wears designer clothes and walks around the way he does. But there's a flip side to it. There's also the argument that Mr. Modi has enhanced India's prestige outside in other countries, that the respect for the Indian passport is far greater than what it was when the Congress was ruling the center. It's a different thing that on parameters on which passports are judged for their strength, that is, the number of countries to which Indians can travel without seeking prior visa. On that parameter, Indian passport is very low down in the list. But do you think that Mr. Modi is not what he was in 2014? And the counter that which he's going to set up, how will this actually add up? In his favor or against him?
Well, thank you again. I think, two very quick points. I think Modi had become this figure that everyone identified with. The word, remember 2014, it was all about aspiration. It was all about this, person who could come from nowhere to take on.
A man who has made it big.
Yeah, and also takes on the most powerful political office. Now you have 10 years of power and authority, not just power, but authority attached to that figure. Now, the question then is, what are Indians going to respond to him now? Are they going to respond to him as a strongman, as an authority figure? Because I don't think anyone is now thinking about his backstory. I mean, it might be there, but there are lots of other people.
Done over many times.
But also there are other contenders like Sukhvinder Sukhu, for instance, also comes from a fairly, the Himachal Pradesh chief minister. There are now many such stories which are, or in fact, the fact that, the Congress has a Dalit, president.
We have a Dalit Congress president is a Dalit.
Yes, exactly. So you have Kharge as a kind of person who, epitomizes, as it were, social inequity and the rise, representing that. So I think it's become much more difficult for Mr. Modi to, claim or will not even be able to claim that. He's in fact going to claim himself as a kind of strongman figure who has, put India's stature on the world stage. And some indications are there that, from the kind of survey reports that, yes, people do feel that he has done some stuff, he has gained, but, foreign policy never really wins an election.
Yes.
It's a different matter. So
we remember what happened in 83 after Mrs. Gandhi, hosted the non-aligned movement summit and the Commonwealth heads of government meeting, all in 83. But by the time she was assassinated, her political graph was going down.
Exactly. So, the foreign policy is kind of, it's a truism. I mean, they don't really win or make you win an election. So I think it'll be, by the same token, I think the fact that Mr. Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi has kind of found a way to be, I think, I wouldn't say he's available, but I think there's a way in which ordinary Indians are beginning to identify with him. And I'm not saying everyone is, but the fact that his, Bharat Jodo Yatra had that openness, spontaneity, and, all the kind of, hugs and selfies that are going around, it's a diametrical opposite image from Prime Minister Modi, who looks quite forbidding, aloof, and as a kind of center of power and authority. And so you're now, you're going to get it's a kind of weird reversal that has taken place. No one is I'm not claiming that Mr. Gandhi is an everyman, but he has become much more identifiable with, at least the younger people of the country walking on the streets. He's become a bit of a celebrity in terms of people wanting selfies and so on with him. And there you have, Modi looking like this, person who is kind of
a very aloof king.
Aloof king, very distant, and almost hard to relate to. He looks like someone you could look up to, but you can't, identify with him. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how he himself projects. And I think this hyper Hindutva politics, I think people could be exhausted by it. So I think it's risky. I think I think the BJP is, in a way, the burden is also equally on Hindutva politics to reinvent itself. because it can't, it can't keep doing it.
Right.
It seems saturated.
I've got some tempted to ask you a very quick question.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Your conversation with Rahul Gandhi in Cambridge last June 2022. So various things were asked. You'd also asked him that what can be done. So he said we have to be like Gandhi. This one statement he'd made that kind of stuck on.
Yes.
Be like Gandhi. Well, he has partly been like Gandhi, as you explained. Went to the people, now suddenly made himself accessible. Would you want, or would you like, or do you think it would be a good tactic to get on another yatra? They keep on talking about a west to east yatra. Do you think it is a good idea once more?
I'm not a political strategist, and I'm not into, so I'm not going to say anything on that. But I think what is interesting is that, again, I can only think about historically. Mahatma Gandhi was very careful. He only held big movements every decade. So he timed the big ones very sparingly. But he kept the small ones. You always had Champaran, you always, had Ahmedabad, you had various smaller movements going on. I think more than just even a yatra, I think you'd have to find a way to galvanize the entire Congress cadres on various fronts. But I think what is interesting and what is exciting is that Indian politics actually now has two sides rather than one side. And a kind of, shouting, screaming going on the corners, on the dissenting corner, which was also being silenced. I think politics has become much more, there's a fight back now. And I don't know whether it will last, whether it will win, but it is.
At the moment, yes.
Nevertheless, it looks clear that the Hindutva project of New India is going to have a contest before it can.
Serious challenge.
Yeah, it is being challenged.
There will be a serious challenge. And taking off from you, definitely the idea that this party is the B team of the BJP, as the Congress used to be called for a long time, that is not being spoken. And I do not think that in the run-up to 2024, this is going to be said about any other party, because there are clearly two different shades of ideology at the moment in Indian politics.
Yeah.
How much of it that is emphasized is going to be seen over the next year. Thank you very much, Professor Shruti Kapila, for sparing time and speaking with us. These are going to be very interesting next 7 months, if I can say. And we would definitely like to come back to you and
of course, gladly.
you once again keep track as to how, to give kind of a running commentary the way they do it in sports, especially cricket,
I'd love to.
I say, is the only religion in this country which actually unites people. Thank you very much, Professor Shruti Kapila.
Subscribe to the Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.